So hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about exploring AI, artificial intelligence, and the impact that it has on ISO certification, right? Everyone's been talking about it now in this day and age, so we're going to dive into various different topics. Some of those topics that we're going to be diving into are what is ISO and why does it matter? After that, we're really going to be diving into artificial intelligence, learning a little bit of the concepts of artificial intelligence, like machine learning, deep learning, generative AI, and training modules. Once we kind of have a basic understanding of all of those concepts and terminologies, we're going to dive into some of the benefits, application, and use cases of AI. After that, we're going to dive into some of the security considerations of AI. And then for most of the people on the call, how is that really going to impact you on your ISO processes, right? Whether it's from an auditing point of view, having processes in place, or any type of other impacts that ISO will have and AI will have on the ISO process. To kind of get started, my name is Bhavin Patel. I'm a manager here at Tevora. I oversee the information security and compliance practice. I've been with the company for about 3+ years. I'm a certified ISO lead auditor. I've been doing ISO audits for 5+ years, both internally and externally. I have my CISA, AWS, and HITRUST certifications, and I have a bachelor's from Georgia State University with the computer information and accounting degree as well. So let's kind of touch really high level on what is ISO. Most of the people on this call probably are familiar with ISO, but just to kind of quickly summarize, ISO is an international organization for standardization, right? So it's essentially a standard that is created by an international organization for standardizations by an independent organization. What it does is it helps you facilitate business and international trade. So you guys have clients in Asia or Europe that you want to do business with. It's used to help facilitate the business transactions when they happen there. There's various different ISO standards that are out there. Some of the ones that you're probably familiar with are ISO 27001 for information security. There's a new standard that's coming out for 42001, which is for artificial intelligence specifically. It's set to be released in January of 2024. So definitely keep an eye out on that standard, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the presentation throughout. At the end of ISO certifications, you typically get a certificate that you give to your partners, vendors, or your clients, and then that shows that you have good practices and processes in place, right? So the intent of 42001, when the AI standard comes out, is going to be to have a similar certification that you will be able to say, okay, these are the AI tools and technologies we use. Here's how we're certified against it. So now let's talk about how ISO relates to artificial intelligence. But before we can dive into that, there's a poll question that we have, right? Let's ask the poll question first is, does your organization have a policy on the use of public AI tools such as ChatGPT? Take a moment to answer the questions on your polls. All right. Now everyone should have gotten the poll question and had time to analyze that poll. It seems like generally the feedback that we're kind of getting is most organizations have some type of policy or program or consideration for ChatGPT. If they don't really have a policy, then it looks like you guys are actually considering that. So that's a good thing. We're going to dive into some of the concepts of why you should have those policies and some of those programs throughout this presentation. So what is artificial intelligence, right? So to kind of put it in simple terms, artificial intelligence essentially is getting a computer to think and act as a human being, right? So essentially we want the computer to make decisions as if a human were to make those same decisions in whatever task it's executing. Artificial intelligence is really broken into 4 main categories, right? The first is reactive machines, the second is limited memory machines, and the third is theory of the mind, and then self-aware. The concepts of theory of the mind and self-aware currently do not exist. These are artificial intelligence technologies that are essentially independent. They don't require human intervention and make decisions on their own. Most of the technologies we interact with today in this day and age are reactive or limited memory. When we're talking about reactive machines and technologies, these are essentially AI technologies that are pre-programmed to do one task, and then that's the only task that they're able to do. They cannot learn and they cannot be optimized to do that task at a faster pace. So essentially, they just do that one task over and over again based off of what you're commanding it to do. Limited memory is most of the tools that you're seeing that are being released now in this day and age, right? These are tools that are able to store data in memory locally, That's the reason it's called limited memory. And then it's able to learn from the data that it's collecting and then optimize the task it's performing, right? So essentially, you think about ChatGPT, it's collecting data and then it's always getting better in terms of the responses that it's able to provide. So that's a concept of a limited memory AI technology. Now that we kind of know the different types of AI technologies that are out there, let's talk a little bit about the underlying fundamental concepts that support AI technology. One is machine learning. So machine learning is essentially the capability of a technology to collect data and then predict the future. Machine learning subcomponent of machine learning is deep learning, right? So when we're talking about deep learning, essentially it's ingesting a vast amount of data and then training a specific tool or model. And then based on that, it's going to be able to predict a decision or make a decision as if a human being were to make that decision. So essentially deep learning is the ability of a machine to learn and make decisions based on its learning. Another concept within artificial intelligence that you guys are probably hearing and reading about in this day and age is generative AI. What is generative AI? Put in simple, generative AI is essentially collects data. Based on the data it collects, it's able to generate new data, right? So think of like ChatGPT. You're able to ask it a question. Based on the questions it's asking, it's analyzing a bunch of information, and based on the information it analyzes, it comes back to you and gives you a whole data set and a response based on that answer, right? Or the question that you set to it. So just to kind of quickly summarize, you have artificial intelligence, you have machine learning, deep learning, and generative AI. These are all concepts within the artificial intelligence discipline. Now, you can't really talk about artificial intelligence without talking about training modules. The terms that we talked about, like machine learning, deep learning, and generative AI, on the back end, they're all trained based off of training models, right? So there's various types of training models that are available. At the end of the day, its purpose is to collect data and then test that data via algorithms and then actually execute a specific task, right? So training modules are going to be the most important thing when we're talking about AI tools and protecting security of those information and the data sets. There's three types. One is supervised learning, second is unsupervised learning, and then the third is reinforcement learning. Supervised learning, think of it as structured data, right? So you have a data set, it's a structured data set, meaning that this is a dog or a cat. You tell it that this is a dog or a cat. A cat has 4 legs, it has a tail, it has furs, it has whiskers, those types of things. So you're essentially labeling what type of data it is, you're feeding it to a training module, and then you're expecting that anytime you have a similar cat or dog image come up, that it's predicting the same outcome. So you're training it based off of telling it what exactly information and data sets you want it to put in. Unsupervised is the complete opposite of that. It's essentially providing it raw data, right? So you provide a technology raw data. Based on the data it collects, it's going to analyze all of the different aspects of that data and then come up with the educated guess. And then based on the educated guess, it's going to say this is a cat or this is a dog, right? You're not defining anything, you're just giving it raw data. And so it's learning continuously from this pattern recognition of all of the data that you're putting into it. Reinforcement learning is the last type of training modules. These are essentially where an AI agent is installed, and then it's learning by trial and error, right? So essentially, it's going to try a task, and then every time it does a good job on the task, you reward it. If it does a bad job, you punish it, and then continuously, you keep doing this over and over again until you get the results that you want within a desirable range, right? So think of an example of a dog. You want the dog to learn how to sit. You're going to give it a treat every time it does sit. When it doesn't sit, you're not going to give it a treat. So just reinforcing the actions based off of what it's doing right and what it's doing wrong until you get the outcomes that you really want. This is a quick summary of the slides. As I mentioned, artificial intelligence is just an overarching discipline, and the machine learning, deep learning, and generative AI are just a subset of it. Feel free to look at these at your own leisure offline. Second poll question: what types of artificial tools and technologies are you using or planning to use within your organization? Take a few moments to answer this question. Perfect. We're getting some responses. Seems like a lot of different opinions are coming in. Some organizations are saying that they want to use artificial AI technologies for like ChatGPT to optimize day-to-day tasks. Some organizations are using it for marketing purposes, for security purposes. So that's good. Let's kind of talk into some of the concepts behind how to protect some of these AI tools, right? Regardless of what type of AI tool and what you're going to use it for within your organization, there's some items that we have to dive into in terms of a security consideration. But before we get into that, let's talk about some of the benefits of AI, right? When we're talking about the benefits of AI, some of the things you can think of are automation, reducing human error, eliminating repetitive tasks. Right? Think about most organizations that have good security practices in place. They have a mandate from like ISO or other frameworks to do a user access review, right? Historically speaking, when you're doing a user access review, you have to take a screenshot of all of the users within the system. Then you have to manually review that access list and then determine if the user is active and if the access that they have is still needed. Once that's done, you would send that back to someone and then they would make changes for any changes that's needed. And then you would sign off and then approve that as a whole access review. Well, with AI technology, you can kind of automate all of those tasks, right? So an AI automation tool will be able to automatically collect access lists from a specific technology that's connected to, right? Just say your administrative system. Then it's going to be able to compare that to like your HRS system like Workday and say, okay, is the employee active? Yes, they need access. Then it's going to compare it to like a job role, right? So, and then it's going to look at the job role and say, okay, this person's in HR. Based on that, they have this level of access. Do they still need it? Yes, they need it. Once it's able to interpret all of that data, then it's going to send that back to you for like one final review, right? So now essentially a task for user access review that could take multiple days to weeks to do is essentially automated by this AI tool. And then once it's automated, you're really just interpreting the information at that point in time. And then you're going to have less errors because the AI tool is pulling information directly from these systems like HRS and the system that you want to do the access review for. So it's going to help with automation. It's going to reduce some of your repetitive tasks, and then it's also going to reduce a lot of the errors that come with doing that process manually. Some of the other benefits of AI is essentially it provides fast and accurate data and information, and then it also helps accelerate research and development patterns, right? So going back to that user access review example, you're really at that point in time not worried about collecting data and trying to manually get that data together. All you're really doing is interpreting how many issues you're having based off of the access reviews that are being done. If you're noticing that there's a lot of changes with, that you're needing to make, well, you can use that information to say, okay, we need to revamp our whole onboarding and offboarding process because we're having way too many access reviews that are saying that access isn't appropriate. So you're exposing yourself to more risk, right? So having access to all of the data accelerates essentially your research capabilities and then helps you optimize those processes in the future. So that's just some of the benefits of AI. There's various other ones out there as well. Now that we kind of talked about the benefits of AI, let's talk about the application and the use cases of AI, right? So there's various use cases and applications: speech recognition, image recognition, translation, predictive modeling, data analytics, cybersecurity. Let's take, for example, speech recognition and translation, right? A lot of people these day and age are doing business with international organizations, right? So you might have a client in India or France and you're in the US. Well, when you're having these businesses or conducting these businesses and meetings, you're usually sometimes left with language barriers, right? So in India, they will be speaking their native language, or in France, they'll be speaking their native language, and the US will be speaking English. Well, just say hypothetically, there's that language barrier. Well, with AI tools, you can have these AI tools integrated to your Zoom meetings or team meetings, whatever it may be. It's going to be able to recognize the conversations that you're having via speech recognition, translate that for you into a different native language. And then once it's able to translate that, the other person in India or France is going to be able to understand that in their native language. So that's going to kind of help optimize some of their day-to-day activities when we're having businesses and meetings with people. Data analytics and cybersecurity, right? One of the biggest things from a cybersecurity and data analytics point of view with AI is you're able to analyze a bunch of data, right? So we were talking about all those training modules and data collection. Well, as you collect all of this information, you're able to analyze the information with the AI tools, right? Think of vulnerabilities. You're doing vulnerability scans every week, every month, whatever it may be. Now you need to ingest that data into like a central location, like a SIM or whatever it might be. Then you can have the AI tool actually analyze all of that information. Now, instead of you having to manually look at every single vulnerability, this AI tools will be able to review all of that and say, hey, based off of your environment and your technology, here's some of your most critical risks that you should probably address based on the scan, right? We always been there and know that when vulnerability scans give you a bunch of false positives, well, these AI tools, if you integrate them, will be able to continuously learn from all these false positives and then continue to develop and get better. So that way it's optimized to just give you the critical results that you really want. And then you will be able to take action on those. So these are just some of the applications and use cases of AI. Now let's talk a little bit about the impact of AI on the ISO certification process, right? So when we're talking about ISO, one of the biggest things is you can automate a lot of your compliance tasks. So if your organization needs to comply with ISO, like we were talking about user access reviews, you can create tasks that are automatically doing that. Or access provisioning, that's another big one, right? Like right now, a lot of organizations have to create a ticket, and then that ticket needs to be manually approved. And then once that's approved, then you have to track that and then provide that to an auditor. Well, with AI tools, now you can kind of integrate that to your existing systems, and then it can do the mapping for you, right? So it sees that from your Workday HRS system, you have a new hire. That new hire's role in the system is HR or whatever it might be, IT. Based on that, it's saying these are the basic level of access that it needs, and then it's going to grant that. What it's also going to do is it's going to actually go in the system and provide a record of that and track that, right? So now you would have that record within your AI system, and then all you really have to do is provide that to your auditor, or the auditor should have access to your AI tool to see all of those activities happening, right? Now, instead of having for them to do like sample selections, like pick a sample, they have access to all of that information. So now they can just pick and choose a few by themselves, right? So you don't manually have to collect all of this information. It's all automatically built into it, and then you can give access to the auditor to these tools, and they'll be able to interpret that data. And then you'll be able to interpret that data as well if you're seeing any type of weird issues or anomalies. Improves risk management and incident response. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but the vulnerability processes and the SIM alerting processes, sometimes it gets overwhelming, right? There's so many vulnerabilities that are popping up. There's so many SIM alerts that are popping up. Well, you can integrate AI tools to those existing processes. What AI tool is going to do is it's going to help interpret that data. And then you're going to continuously train it over and over again to optimize it for your organization. So that way, next time there is a similar vulnerability that's a false positive, it doesn't show up. Or when there is a vulnerability that was set as low, but in your organization it's high, it learns from that behavior. Now it's going to be able to provide all of this information to your security operations center or your personnel, and then they're going to be more so focused on fixing these vulnerabilities and issues as opposed to interpreting and analyzing this information. So that's going to increase their efficiency and their workload, right? They're going to be able to focus on more remediation and fixes of those items. What that does also is it also increases efficiency, but also potentially reduces the attack vector from an incident, right? So we all know when there's an incident, the biggest thing is to try to analyze the information, where the incident came from, what was the root cause, etc. Well, if you have AI tools that are already integrated with that information, you can ask the questions and you can do like quick analysis. So that way the incident can be contained in a much faster environment. So your SLAs are being expedited because you have these AI technologies and tools being able to help analyze a lot of this information. It increases visibility, right? So as you integrate all of these AI tools and technologies with your business processes, right? So like HR or vulnerability management or alerting, whatever it may be, you're going to have access to so much information and data. Well, with that data, now you can use the information to make strategic decisions, right? So in the case of the SIM and the vulnerability example, if you're seeing certain vulnerabilities coming from one technology, well, you have access to that information. So now you can strategically make a decision and say, hey, do we really want to have this technology, or do we need to update this technology? Or what do we need to do to reduce our attack vector from this technology? Because most of our vulnerability is related to that. So having that level of visibility into all of the data will be able to help you guys optimize your strategic decisions and cybersecurity decisions based on that information. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the security considerations of AI, right? With any new technologies, there's a good and there's a bad. The biggest thing that really comes from a security consideration point of view is incomplete, inaccurate data, right? So we were kind of talking about training models and whatnot earlier. Well, when you're using the AI tool, whether it's public or private, and then you're creating your own AI tool, the biggest thing that's going to impact how the tool functions is the data that it collects, right? So it's really important that you provide it accurate, complete data. If you're providing an incomplete or inaccurate data, it's never going to get the results that you really want. Or malware can be introduced because of it, like hackers can take advantage of that to execute malicious activity. So it's always going to be really important that your data sets are accurate as much as possible. And then you also want to restrict your data sets, right? Whether you're using a public tool or creating your own, whoever has access to the data sets can manipulate that data in any type of way, right? So you want to make sure that the data is only available to those members within your organization that are skilled and have the experience to manage the data, but also are doing it for a day-to-day basis, right? If anyone else needs the data set, it needs to be in a read-only view. This will kind of help make sure that there's no data leaks or privacy considerations, right? Which is the other big thing. As AI tool use expands, there's going to be a lot of sharing of information between organization to organization. When you're sharing these data sets and information between organizations, now it becomes a little bit of a gray area from a privacy point of view. Who owns that data and who's a controller versus a processor, right? So those are the things that you're going to have to consider as a part of that. Like, all right, what new privacy risks are introduced? Is there any new requirements that I need to follow? Who's going to be responsible for that data from an intellectual property point of view? So these are just some of the security considerations that we should consider before implementing any type of AI tool. As the technology grows and develops, there's going to be more security considerations as well. Now that we kind of talked about that, let's go into a poll question. Do you guys have any security controls in place for AI tools currently? And if you guys are using them within the organization? Take a few moments to answer the question. Awesome. So some of the responses are coming in. It seems like the biggest thing that I'm seeing on my side from the responses is you guys do have some type of policies and procedures. ChatGPT seems like that's the biggest one, whether you guys are going to allow that or block that from uses for employees. So those are all good things to consider, obviously. But regardless of what AI tool you're using, we're going to dive into some of the security considerations of using those AI tools, right? So let's talk about it from an ISO and just a general auditing point of view. One of the biggest things that you're going to have to do is data classification, right? You guys probably have a classification policy or you need to create one, but you're going to have to update your existing policies to clearly define the types of data that are within your organization. Once you define the types of data, you're going to have to classify them as public, private, sensitive, etc. Based on each of those classifications, you're going to have to specify what are the cases allowed for use within the AI technology, right? So for example, public data, can that be used in a ChatGPT versus private data, PII, can that be used in ChatGPT? Well, your data classification policy needs to call out those different aspects within there. So you're going to really have to train your stakeholders on your classification policy once you define it, right? So you're going to have to do awareness campaigns, training sessions, etc. So you're going to have to say, okay, here's the types of data we have. Here's examples of the data. Here's how you should be using the data within your organization based on that. If they're not sure, you should probably set up a forum or a channel of Slack or some sort of Slack channel for stakeholders to reach out to security personnel, right? So if they're not sure like what type of data is within the AI tool or what type of AI data you can upload to this AI technology, then they should have a Slack channel or forum that they can reach out to and say, hey, can you help me with identifying the severity of it? You know, train them to always use a more conservative route versus trying to be aggressive. Once you've kind of taken care of the data classification aspects, you're also going to have to create the AI policies and program, right? So you're going to have, similar to how you have an information security policy and program that governs most of your security practices, the AI policy and program really should be governing how you guys are using AI technology that is open source, private, or self-developed, and then what are your use cases as it relates to that, right? So you need to identify like, these are all of the public AI tools that are available. Are you guys allowing it or not allowing it? By default, you can disable the use of public AI tools like ChatGPT or the other ones out there. But then if you do allow it, what are your stipulations for using it, right? Can you add PII information? Can you add PHI information? No, but you need to outline that in your AI policy. But a private tool, right? So you work with the vendor that's using a private AI tool. Now you have access to the data set and you can contain the data sets within your organization. Well, you might say from a policy point of view, yes, we're allowed to share sensitive PHI or PII data because we know where the data set is going to be stored and where it's going to be managed, right? So those are the types of things from a policy point of view that you have to consider. What tools are allowed, what type of data can be used within those tools, and then what are the approval processes to get those tools, right? So for example, if you have a ChatGPT that I want to use or any other tool, how do I actually get access to that tool and then approve before I can use it? And then you would have to reach out to the security team. Security team will have to vet the tool and technology and then approve it and install it. So those are some of the things to kind of consider within that AI policy and program. Outside of a creation of AI policy and program, we should also be creating guidelines and standards, especially if the organization is creating a new AI technology or planning to create an AI technology. You're going to have to define the guidelines and standards on how testing needs to be done on the data sets and the technology behind the AI tool, right? So we were talking about the training models. It's going to be using vast amount of data, and then you have to train it continuously to produce an outcome. Well, you're going to have to come up with model testing, validation requirements, security testing, etc., just to say, okay, when this testing is done, we feel comfortable with the results of it. Now we can deploy that as a production environment. All of the testing we know needs to be done in a sandbox environment, right? But what level of assurance do you need from the testing before you can actually deploy that from a production point of view? You need to come up with performance matrix, right? Like based off of like the testing that you're doing and the validation requirements, what is an acceptable level of performance before you actually deploy that? That all needs to be outlined within your guidelines and standards. And then your developers that are developing this needs to be trained on the tools and technology. And then they need to make sure that they're complying with that. And you guys are monitoring compliance against the creation of those technologies. You also need to have an inventory, right? With AI tools, you're going to be having a lot more AI systems and tools that you're going to use. Well, the risk associated with that is now you don't really know what type of data is on there, right? So having an inventory of all of your AI systems and tools, plus the data that's within those tools, is really going to help you guys mitigate some of the risks that we talked about earlier, right? Like if you know where the system you're using, you know what type of data is on there, based on your classification policy and your AI policy procedures, you can make sure that the owners of those systems are implementing the security controls they need to, right? So if HR or marketing is using the specific technology to help them do blog creations or market creations, well, what tool are they using? What type of data does that go into? Generally, that's mostly public data, so there's less risk. But if the SOC team is using some type of tool for AI and they're sending like vulnerabilities, that becomes a little bit more sensitive, right? So this AI management system will essentially help you enforce the technical controls we talked about from the classification policy and the AI programs by having inventory of that readily accessible. Last but not least, the biggest thing that we're seeing is threat testing, right? So Microsoft recently had a breach where they had a public repository for one of their training modules. That public repository was open to anyone in GitHub. A hacker was able to get access to that GitHub repository. And then what happened was there was no permissions or access restrictions to that repository. So they were able to pivot to other more sensitive areas. And then when they got to those more sensitive areas, they were able to collect usernames, passwords, they were able to get secrets. They also got access to a lot of private like team messages, right? It's kind of scary to think about when you have access to all of that information that's just publicly accessible. Well, threat testing needs to be updated, right? So you have to do more threat testing from a red team point of view. You're going to have to scan all of your open source tools like your GitHub repositories. Any open source AI technology you're using, you're going to have to scan against that. All of these scannings and testings, you're going to have to do through either internal methods or external organization like Tevora. You're going to have to do bug bounty programs, right? Bug bounty programs are real helpful because you have someone in the country throughout just identifying vulnerabilities and trying to penetrate your system. If they identify anything, they're going to reach out to you and let you know, and then you can give them a reward based off of how critical that impact is, right? So if you're organization doesn't have any bug bounty programs, it's probably good to consider a bug bounty program because they'll be able to help identify any of those issues beyond just your regular penetration testing and red team testing and whatnot. Phishing and vishing exercises, right? With AI technology creation, there's going to be a lot more targeted phishing campaigns, right? All of these AI automation tools can create phishing emails that look and feel like a real email from a CISO of a company, or even vishing, right? Like you can have AI technology sound and act like me right now, and then if I'm the CISO of a company, they can send that information to someone within the organization and ask for like sensitive information. Well, with these new AI vishing and phishing technologies, users need to be trained, right? So you're gonna have to do awareness education on that. Like, how do you really identify a malicious phishing email? Or how do you identify like a malicious vishing email, right? It's not gonna be as easy as it was before. Like before you would look at items like grammar errors and those types of things, like a wrong email domain. Or these AI technologies, the tools are going to be able to be more smarter and come up with better emails and better like campaigns from a phone point of view. So you're going to have to continuously reinforce that with your users, that employees are not going to, I'm never going to call you as a CISO and ask you for sensitive information, right? Those types of things. Or I'm never going to email you and ask you for something sensitive. Those types of communications and user trainings need to occur more often within the organization. You'll need to talk about some of the trends and analysis that you're seeing based off of the phishings and vishing as well. So there's going to have to be more data and information that you're providing to your users and stakeholders based on all of the risks that you're seeing. So these are just some of the auditing considerations that you should consider. There's a vast amount of other items like vendor management, etc. We won't have time too much to get into that in today's conversation, but if you guys have any questions or concerns about that, just note that I mentioned earlier, ISO 42001 is coming out in early 2024. That standard is really going to be the driving standard going forward on how to implement an artificial intelligence management system. It's going to be a standard that most organizations can get certified with, similar to ISO 27001. You're going to have a whole 3-year certificate. You're going to have to go through an internal audit process, all of those different things. So those are just some of the things that you guys should look out for when that standard does come out. If you have any questions in the meantime, obviously feel free to reach out to me or anyone in our Tevora team to address those questions. That being said, we'll kind of pause here for any type of questions that are available.
Unmuted.
So one of the questions it looks like we had from the audience member is, are you considered non-compliant with ISO 27001 if you don't directly address AI in your policies? Well, that's a great question. Right now, there's no requirement in 27001 regarding the creation of policies for AI, but we do know 27001 is a continuous improvement framework. And so with the use and interaction of AI tools within your organization and the creation of them, you will have to start considering it, right? Like ChatGPT is just the starting of it. If there's other tools you're using to automate some of your tasks, like the SOC tools or marketing tools, you would definitely need to consider updates to your existing policies based off of that. So it's not non-compliant, but you will have those conversations with your auditors, do your internal audit and external audit of like, what are the security considerations that you're seeing? And then when ISO 42001 comes out, that's when you're actually going to be mandated to have all of those policies and procedures in place. So right now it's not a mandate, and you're not going to not be complying with 27001, but these are all risk items that you should definitely consider as part of that. Another question that just came up is, can I ban AI usage in my company? Yes, for sure. You can definitely ban the use of AI. I think JP Morgan, Verizon, and even the country of Italy has banned the use of like tools like ChatGPT and other AI tools. We at Tevora take the stance that we don't necessarily want you guys to ban them because there are a lot of use cases and functionalities and benefits of AI that we talked about. It's really, if you're going to use those within your organization, you have to take into consideration all the security aspects that we talked about, right? Reviewing the technologies and tools, reviewing the data, interpreting how the data is protected. And then even like if you're collecting an AI tool from a different company and sharing the data, you'll need to consider some of your contractual pieces, right? Like from a contract point of view, if there was a breach, what are things that would happen? who would be responsible for those types of things. So definitely can ban the usage within your organization, but it's going to be increasingly harder to do that just because AI is going to be the next realm and everyone's going to use it at some point in time. So it makes more sense to really create policies and procedures and controls to manage the uses of AI as opposed to completely banning it. And as I mentioned, AI tools has a lot of benefits for increasing efficiency. So definitely just consider these points in the interim. I don't see any other questions on the chat. Oh, another one just came in. With this new AI framework, will the implementation of ISO 27001 going to be reduced? No, so the AI framework is essentially for 42001 is going to be an add-on, right? So it's a separate certification process, but essentially I would think of it as an add-on. So 27001 is going to be to address all of your security within your organization, right? You have security practices for your tools and technologies. The AI framework is really going to be focused on how you're using your AI tools and technologies specifically. So I would think of it as you would need to have both at some point in time, right? So if you're going to develop AI tools or you're going to be using AI tools, then you would probably obviously want to have 27001, but then the 42001, you want to have that as add-on. So it's not going to get rid of 27001. It's going to be an add-on to it. I will say you will see a lot of overlaps, right? So similar to all other ISO standards, you're going to have to create like an ISMS policy and an AIMS policy, artificial intelligence management system. You'll be able to consolidate a lot of your policies and procedures where there are overlap. But there's going to be specific requirements for artificial intelligence that you're going to have to add. Like we were talking about, those validation testings, having the AI policy, those types of things. But wherever there is similarities with 27001, you'll be able to re-leverage and repurpose a lot of the same information for that. Great question. Any other questions? Seems like there's no other questions that are outstanding right now. So just want to take a moment to thank everyone for joining this presentation. Hopefully we all learned something new. If you guys have any questions or concerns after the presentation, please feel free to reach out to anyone on the Tevora team. We're more than happy to have those conversations and set up meetings as appropriate, but definitely appreciate everyone for coming out. Oh, Emma, do we get one more?
Yes, there's like one more question.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, perfect. So will Tevora start the AI audit implementation? Correct. So I guess when it comes to like auditing against the ISO standards, Tevora will do that. So whenever the standard comes out early next year, we'll have a whole process set up in terms of how we're going to audit against that, how we can help you guys implement those processes, similar to all of our other Tevora practices and processes. You know, for 27001, we'll walk you guys through it from start to finish. Like, what are your current processes? What are your gaps against those processes? We'll help you guys implement those processes, and then we'll get you guys audited against that with the appropriate certification bodies like BSI or whoever it is, and then you have your certification. But Tevora is always going to be by your side when you guys need any type of help with the auditing process for AI. Any other questions?
Nope.
Awesome. Well, once again, thanks everyone for joining the presentation. It's been great for me to present. Hopefully we all learned something from it. As I mentioned, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Tevora team at any point in time.